Now that you've gone through step 1 of giving academic grades for your students, let's go ahead and add those learner characteristic grades. As always, please make sure your quarter on the right-hand side is set to the correct quarter in which you are giving grades. To add learner characteristic grades, please make sure you are in the homeroom section from your top drop-down course menu. Once you are in your homeroom, go to A+ grading. Underneath grades, go to standards. Now that you're in the standards section for this homeroom, you should see student names on the left and a long list of columns on the right-hand side. These columns are your learner characteristic columns. You can tell because they start with the grade level that you are in. I'm in 2nd grade, so this starts with a 2. Then the letters LC for learner characteristics, and then the number 1. This aligns with the learner characteristic area on a report card. In order to give grades that associate with the learner characteristic grading scale, you will need to click in the cell for a student. Once you click in that cell, the grade calculator will appear on the right. Before entering grades, however, many people get confused as to what standard this is. You can hover over each column to see column description for the learner characteristic. However, the text and font are very small. A trick to show you to make this bigger is, once you are in a cell to give a student a grade, you can click on the Show More button. That Show More button will now show the exact learner characteristic items that are being graded for this column. So for this student in this column, they are getting a grade for self-awareness, which a description shows 2 items aligned with self-awareness. In order to give a grade, you'll need to know what type of grade the student should get on the learner characteristic grading scale. To help you know that scale, you can now click on the Grade Scale tab and see that an A is almost always, an O is often, an S is sometimes, and an N is not yet or rarely demonstrating. Because no numeric grades are given, no 100s, 74s, 49s, or 24s will be on the report card. However, it can be helpful to use this column % cutoff to have an idea that almost always means that a student is demonstrating that those behaviors 75% or more of the time, while often means they are doing it 50% or more of the time. So for my student Marcus, I am in his cell for learner characteristic 1. I'm going to go over to the grade calculator and give him an A for almost always demonstrating. As always, make sure to save at the end once you enter grades for one student or a group of students so those grades are saved. Now that I've finished this grade for this learner characteristic, I can move to the next column for this student. And if I click on description, I can now see the next learner characteristic description. Alternatively, I can give grades for one learner characteristic for all students. As always, make sure to save any changes you have made at the bottom. There are 5 learner characteristic columns for each student. All 5 columns need a grade using the AOSN grade or the learner characteristic grade scale, every progress report, and every report card. Just to let you know, the grades from the previous progress report are saved, so when you go to the next grading period, you will only update each column if a student's grade has changed from what it was previously. So now I can go ahead and start giving grades to all students. But in order to save time, I can use the fill up and down or the fill across button. And these buttons will fill in any blank grade for students with one I've already used for a student. So for example, Anthony Campbell is going to receive an O for learner characteristic number 1. He has 4 more learner characteristics I have to fill out. I could go into each cell and enter his score, but Anthony has received an O for 50% or more demonstration of each of these learner characteristics. So instead of clicking into each one, I'm going to click in this first cell where I wrote the O and use the Fill Across button. This will now update the blank scores and fill them in with O's for this student all the way across. I'm going to make sure to save as always, but this saved me lots of clicking into each individual cell. I can also do the same and fill down. So if all of the students for learner characteristic 1 also received an O, I can select the score for Anthony and fill down. Remember, it will only fill in blank scores, but it updated 3 student scores for me. Remember, the fill up and down and fill across are used for one student to fill across or for multiple students with one standard when filling down. The fill up and down and fill across options will not replace existing grades, so can only be used with empty boxes. If a box has a little icon in the top right indicating a score has been there previously, it will not fill them in. Only boxes that have never had a score entered. The fill up and down and fill across option can be used for learner characteristic standards and academic standards in both academic courses and related arts.